The night Carence's life shattered into 1,000 irreparable pieces began with a whisper. He'd never choose you. Bryony's voice slithered through the crowded hall like venom, finding its mark with practiced precision. The words burrowed deep into Carence's chest, settling beside all the other wounds that had never quite healed. She stood at the edge of the great hall of Valdris Keep, pressed against the cold stone wall as if hoping it might swallow her whole. Around her, hundreds of unmated wolves preened and postured, their finest gowns and ceremonial leathers catching the firelight from 1,000 floating candles. The choosing ceremony happened once every decade. The night when the Alpha King of the Northern Realm would select his queen from among the gathered wolves of all 12 packs. Every unmated female over the age of 20 had been summoned, including her. Honestly, Carence, I don't know why you even bothered coming. Ottilie appeared at Bryony's side, her copper hair gleaming like a freshly minted coin. She looked Carence up and down with theatrical disdain. That dress looks like something my mother's servant would reject. Carence's fingers tightened on the worn fabric of her slate gray gown. It had been her mother's once, the only thing she left behind before she disappeared when Carence was barely a moon old. Her father had told her it was sickness that took Maelith, though he could never meet her eyes when he said it. I was summoned, Carence said quietly, same as everyone else. Summoned? Bryony laughed, the sound like breaking glass. The invitation was a formality. The Alpha King wants a queen with power, with status, with a wolf worthy of standing beside his. Her eyes glittered with malice. Not a half-breed with a wolf so weak it barely exists. The words landed like physical blows. Half-breed. The slur followed Carence everywhere. Her father had been a wolf of the Valdris pack. Strong, respected, a warrior of some renown. But her mother had been something else entirely. Something no one would speak of. Something that had left Carence with a wolf that flickered like a dying candle flame, present but barely there. A wolf that had never once fully emerged. The hall fell suddenly silent. Carence felt it before she saw it. A pressure in the air, a weight that pressed against her very soul. Her weak wolf, dormant for so many years, stirred unexpectedly in her chest. The massive oak doors at the far end of the hall swung open, and he walked in. Alpha King Lorcan of the Northern Realm. Carence forgot to breathe. He was tall, devastatingly, overwhelmingly tall, with shoulders broad enough to block out the light from the doorway behind him. His hair was black as a moonless night, swept back from a face that looked carved from granite and shadow. Cold, calculating, the pale silver of cold, calculating, the pale silver of winter frost. Those eyes stopped on Carence, and then, without a word, without hesitation, the Alpha King began walking directly toward her. Bryony's gasp echoed in the sudden silence. That's not... He can't be... But he was. And he wasn't stopping. Every step the Alpha King took sent ripples of shock through the gathered crowd. Wolves parted before him like water before the prow of a ship, their faces twisted with confusion, disbelief, envy. The most powerful alphas in the realm, warriors who commanded thousands, whose wolves could level mountains, shrank back as he passed. And still his eyes never left Carence's face. She couldn't move, couldn't think. Her wolf, that faint whisper of power she'd spent her whole life ashamed of, was doing something it had never done before. It was rising. Not fully. Not the complete emergence that other wolves experienced. But something was clawing its way up from the depths of her soul, straining toward the approaching king with desperate, inexplicable need. This is a mistake, Bryony hissed, her composure cracking. He must be looking at someone behind you. But there was no one behind Carence, only cold stone and shadow. Alpha King Lorcan stopped 3 feet away from her. Up close, he was even more overwhelming. Power radiated from him like heat from a forge, pressing against her skin, making it hard to breathe. His silver eyes studied her face with an intensity that made her feel stripped bare, every secret exposed. Your name. His voice was deep, rough, like stones grinding together in a riverbed. Kerensa's throat had turned to sand. Kerensa, of the Valdris Pack, Your Majesty. Something flickered in those frost-pale eyes. Recognition? No, that couldn't be. They had never met. She would have remembered. Kerensa, he repeated, and the way he said it, like he was tasting something rare and precious, sent shivers cascading down her spine. The hall had gone deathly quiet. Kerensa could feel hundreds of eyes boring into her back, could practically hear the vicious whispers already forming. The Alpha King raised one hand. Kerensa flinched, expecting... She didn't know what. Rejection? A mistake corrected? For him to realize he'd approached the wrong wolf and walk away, leaving her with nothing but humiliation and the tattered remains of her dignity. Instead, his fingers brushed her cheek with unexpected gentleness, and the world exploded. Light, blinding, golden, searing, erupted from the point where his skin touched hers. Kerensa heard screaming, realized distantly that some of it was her own, but she couldn't stop, couldn't pull away. Her wolf wasn't flickering anymore. It was roaring. Power she'd never known she possessed tore through her veins like wildfire, reshaping her from the inside out. 23 years of suppression, of weakness, of being told she was less than nothing. All of it burned away in an instant. When the light finally faded, Kerensa found herself on her knees, gasping. The Alpha King knelt before her, his face transformed. The cold calculation was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like awe. It's you, he breathed. After all these years, it's actually you. I don't... Kerensa's voice broke. I don't understand. Behind them, Bryony's voice rang out, shrill with fury. What is the meaning of this? She's nobody. A half-breed with a broken wolf. She can't possibly be. Silence. The single word from the Alpha King hit the room like a physical force. Bryony crumpled mid-sentence, driven to her knees by the sheer weight of his command. Lorcan turned back to Kerensa, his silver eyes burning. You are not a half-breed, he said softly. You never were. Then what am I? The question hung in the air between them, and the answer the Alpha King gave would change everything Kerensa thought she knew about herself, and about the mother who had vanished before she could remember her face. Your mother, Lorcan said quietly, was not human, not wolf, not anything this realm has seen in over 1,000 years. Kerensa stared at him, her mind struggling to process his words through the roaring chaos in her skull. Her wolf, her real wolf, the one that had been caged and suppressed her entire life, paced restlessly inside her now, fully awake for the first time. It was terrifying. It was exhilarating. What are you talking about? She whispered. The Alpha King rose to his feet, extending his hand to help her up. Kerensa hesitated for only a heartbeat before taking it, and the moment their palms touched, that same electric warmth flooded through her. Though gentler now, a steady current rather than a violent storm. Not here. His eyes swept the crowded hall, where hundreds of wolves stood frozen in various states of shock and outrage. There are too many ears, too many who would use this knowledge as a weapon. Use what knowledge? Kerensa's voice cracked with frustration. I don't understand any of this. 5 minutes ago, I was the embarrassment of my pack, the half-breed with the broken wolf. And now you're telling me... I'm telling you, Lorcan interrupted, his grip tightening on her hand, that you are the most important wolf in this realm, perhaps in any realm. His silver eyes bore into hers. And there are those who have spent the last 2 decades trying to ensure you never discovered that truth. The words hit Kerensa like a blow to the chest. 2 decades. She was 23 years old. Someone did this to me deliberately? The question came out as barely a whisper. Someone suppressed my wolf? Not someone. Lorcan's jaw tightened, and for a moment, something dark and dangerous flickered across his features. A coven. The same coven that killed your mother when she refused to hand you over. The world tilted sideways. Kerensa's mother hadn't died of sickness. She'd been murdered. No. The word tore from her throat. That's not... My father said. Your father lied. There was no cruelty in Lorcan's voice, only a grim certainty that was somehow worse. He lied to protect you, to keep you hidden, the binding on your wolf. He allowed it because it was the only way to mask what you truly are. And what is that? Kerensa demanded, her voice rising. To be a lie? Lorcan leaned closer. His to be a lie? Lorcan leaned closer, his lips nearly brushing her ear. You are a Veilborn, he breathed. The last of a bloodline that predates the pacts themselves. Your kind once ruled the spaces between worlds. The Boundary Walkers, the Dreamweavers, the ones who could step through shadows and emerge anywhere they wished. Kerensa's blood turned to ice. She'd heard stories of the Veilborn. Every pup had. They were legends, myths, cautionary tales told to frighten children into obedience. The Veilborn weren't supposed to be real. That can't be true, she breathed. Then explain how you called to me across 300 miles, Kerensa. Explain how I've dreamed of your face every night for the past 10 years, though we'd never met. Explain how my wolf recognized yours the moment I entered this hall. Recognized it as the other half of a bond that was forged before either of us was born. The implication of his words slowly sank in. A bond forged before birth. Dreams spanning a decade. A connection that transcended distance and logic and everything she thought she understood about how the world worked. We're mates, she said numbly. True mates. Lorcan's silver eyes blazed with an emotion she couldn't name. We're far more than that. Before Kerensa could demand an explanation for his cryptic words, the temperature in the great hall plummeted. It happened so suddenly that her breath crystallized in the air before her face. Frost crept across the stone floor in jagged patterns, and the 1,000 floating candles flickered violently, half of them extinguishing in unison. Lorcan moved faster than her eyes could track. One moment he stood before her. The next, he had spun her behind him, his body a shield of muscle and barely contained fury. A growl rumbled from his chest, deep, primal, a sound that vibrated through Kerensa's bones and made her newly awakened wolf bare its teeth in response. They found her, Lorcan snarled. Already. Who? Kerensa peered around his shoulder, her heart hammering against her ribs. The great oak doors at the far end of the hall had frozen solid. Intricate patterns of ice crawled up their surface like living things, forming shapes that hurt to look at. Symbols that seemed to writhe and twist at the edges of her vision. And standing before those doors, where no one had stood a moment ago, were 3 figures draped in robes the color of dried blood. The Coven of the Severed Moon. Kerensa didn't know how she knew their name. The knowledge simply appeared in her mind, ancient and certain, as if it had always been there waiting to be remembered. Lorcan of the Northern Realm. The center figure spoke, and her voice was wrong, layered, echoing, as if multiple people were speaking through one throat. You were warned what would happen if you sought the Veilborn child. I was warned by cowards who hide behind dark magic. Lorcan's voice could have frozen the sun. Show your faces, witches, or are you too afraid to let my wolves see what they'll be tearing apart? The figure laughed, a sound like cracking ice. Your wolves. She gestured lazily, and throughout the hall, the most powerful alphas in the realm crumpled to the ground, clutching their heads and screaming. Your wolves are nothing but animals playing at civilization. You have no idea what forces you've interfered with. Kerensa watched in horror as warriors twice her size writhed in agony on the frost-covered floor. Bryony was among them, her earlier cruelty forgotten, as she sobbed and clawed at her own face. Stop it! The words tore from Kerensa's throat before she could think. You're killing them! The hooded figure tilted her head, and though Carenza couldn't see her face, she felt the weight of the witch's attention like a physical pressure. Ah, there she is. The witch took a step forward, and the frost spread beneath her feet. The abomination who should have died with her mother. Tell me, child. Do you know why we've hunted your bloodline to extinction? Carenza's wolf surged inside her, straining against 23 years of magical chains. Power crackled beneath her skin, desperate for release. Because you're afraid, she heard herself say. You're afraid of what we can do. Silence. Then the witch began to laugh again, and this time the sound carried genuine amusement. Afraid? No, little Veilborn. She raised one withered hand, and shadows began gathering around her fingers like living smoke. We are not afraid. We are simply thorough. The shadows launched toward Carenza like striking serpents. Lorcan roared and lunged to intercept them, but he wasn't fast enough. The darkness slammed into Carenza's chest, and instead of destroying her, it sank beneath her skin and disappeared. For one eternal heartbeat, nothing happened. Then Carenza opened her mouth and screamed as memories that weren't hers exploded through her mind. Memories of blood and betrayal, of a mother who had died with a secret on her lips. A secret about what Carenza had been born to destroy. The visions tore through Carenza's consciousness like wildfire through dry timber. She saw a woman who looked almost exactly like her. The same dark hair, the same sharp cheekbones, but with eyes that shifted through colors beyond naming. The woman stood in a chamber of black stone, cradling a newborn infant against her chest. Her mother. This was her mother. You must take her. Maelith, the name surfaced unbidden, pressed the baby into the arms of a man Carenza recognized from faded childhood memories. Coven won't stop hunting. Then we give Coven won't stop hunting. Then we give her time. Maelith's strange eyes glistened with unshed tears. 20 years, perhaps more, before the binding weakens enough for her true nature to emerge. By then, she may be strong enough to survive what's coming. And what about you? Maelith smiled, a smile so full of sorrow and love that it broke Carenza's heart. I will lead them away. Make them believe I've taken her to the eastern reaches. Buy you time to disappear. They'll kill you. Yes. The word was simple. Accepting. Final. But she will live. Our daughter will live. And one day she will do what our bloodline was created to do. The vision shifted, fractured, reassembled. Carenza saw her mother running through a forest of twisted black trees, 3 figures in blood-red robes closing in behind her. She saw Maelith turn to face them, her hands blazing with light that seemed to bend reality itself. She saw her mother fight, and gods, how she fought. The very fabric of the world rippled around Maelith as she tore holes in existence, stepping through shadows only to emerge behind her attackers, striking with claws of pure starlight. 2 of the witches fell screaming, their robes catching fire that burned in colors beyond the visible spectrum. But the third, the one who had spoken in the Great Hall, merely watched from a distance, her lips moving in a continuous chant. Blood magic. The realization crashed through Carenza like a physical blow. They were using blood magic, powered by the sacrifice of their own coven members, to fuel a spell of unimaginable darkness. Maelith realized it too late. The curse struck her mid-stride, freezing her in place. You could have joined us. The surviving. You could have joined us. The surviving witch approached slowly, savoring her victory. The Veilborn and the Coven, united as we were in the ancient days. Together, we could have ruled every realm that exists. Maelith laughed, a broken, defiant sound. My daughter will finish what I started. Your daughter will never know what she is. The binding your mate placed on her will hold until she's old and gray, and she'll die believing herself a broken, worthless half-breed. The witch leaned close, her hood falling back to reveal a face that had once been beautiful, now ravaged by centuries of dark magic. Seraphina. The name surfaced from Malith's memories like poison rising to the surface. Just as you will die knowing you sacrificed everything for nothing. Malith's shifting eyes found something behind the witch, something invisible, intangible, something that existed only between heartbeats. She smiled. You forget, she whispered, what the Veilborn can do with their final breath. Even across the miles that separated them, Malith's last breath found its target, the daughter she would never hold again. And then Kerensa's mother spoke a word that shouldn't have been possible, a word that existed in the spaces between sounds, and everything exploded into light. The vision shattered. Kerensa gasped back to consciousness on the floor of the great hall, her body convulsing, tears streaming down her face. Kerensa! Lorcan's voice, desperate, distant. But she could barely hear him over the revelation thundering through her skull. Her mother hadn't just died. Her mother had hidden something. A weapon. A secret. A truth. In the one place the Coven would never think to look. Inside Kerensa herself. Lorcan caught Kerensa before she could collapse completely, his arms wrapping around her like iron bands. The three witches hadn't moved. They stood frozen at the far end of the hall, and even through her tear-blurred vision, Kerensa could see that something had changed. Seraphina's posture had shifted from predatory confidence to something that looked almost like fear. What did you see? Seraphina demanded, her layered voice cracking at the edges. What did Malith show you? Kerensa couldn't answer. Her throat was raw from screaming, her mind still reeling from the onslaught of borrowed memories. But something new pulsed beneath her breastbone. Something that had been locked away for 23 years and was now clawing its way free. She saw enough. Lorcan rose to his feet, positioning himself between Kerensa and the Coven. Made a critical error coming here. Made a critical error coming here tonight. You think we fear you, Alpha King? Seraphina spread her arms and the shadows around her writhed. You are powerful, yes, perhaps the strongest wolf to walk these lands in generations. But you are still just a wolf. No. The word came from Kerensa. She didn't remember standing, didn't remember pushing past Lorcan, but suddenly she was on her feet, her body moving with a purpose that seemed to originate somewhere beyond conscious thought. Her wolf wasn't just awake anymore. It was merging with something else, something older and stranger and infinitely more powerful. No, she repeated, her voice harmonizing with undertones she'd never produced before. He's not just a wolf, and neither am I. Seraphina recoiled. The binding should have held for decades more. My mother was cleverer than you knew. Kerensa raised her hand, and light gathered around her fingers, the same starlight she'd seen Malith wield in the vision. She didn't just hide my power. She hid the key to unlocking it. The memories, Seraphina breathed, understanding dawning. The curse we sent, it was supposed to shatter your mind. Instead, it unlocked everything my mother left behind. Kerensa smiled, and it was not a kind smile. Including what she stole from your coven the night she died. For the first time, genuine terror crossed Seraphina's ruined face. The Covenant flame, she whispered. She couldn't have... We searched her body. We searched everywhere. You searched everywhere except inside her newborn daughter. The starlight around Kerensa's fingers intensified, shifting through colors that shouldn't exist. She breathed it into me with her last word. The only weapon in existence that can destroy the coven of the severed moon permanently. Seraphina's composure crumbled entirely. Kill her! She shrieked at her companions. Now, before she learns to wield it. The two robed figures surged forward, dark magic crackling around their hands. But Lorcan was faster. Kerensa had never seen a wolf transform so quickly. One instant he was a man. The next, a beast the size of a warhorse stood where he'd been, his fur black as midnight, his eyes blazing silver. He hit the first witch like a battering ram, his jaws closing around her throat before she could complete her spell. It erupted from her palm in a concentrated beam of starlight. "Lorcan!" Kerensa thrust her hand forward instinctively. The starlight answered. It erupted from her palm in a concentrated beam that struck the witch dead center, passing through her as if she were made of smoke. The woman didn't even have time to scream before she simply unraveled, her body dissolving into motes of fading darkness. Silence fell over the hall. Kerensa stared at her shaking hand, at the fading light still dancing across her fingers. She had just killed someone. No. She had just annihilated someone. And Seraphina was gone, vanished in the chaos, fled to plot and scheme and return with greater numbers. The war had only just begun. The aftermath of battle hung heavy in the frozen hall. Wolves were slowly rising from the floor, their faces pale and drawn from the coven's psychic assault. Many looked at Kerensa with expressions she couldn't quite read: awe, fear, suspicion, or some churning mixture of all three. She didn't care about any of them. Her eyes were fixed on Lorcan as he shifted back to his human form, his massive wolf retreating beneath skin that now bore fresh wounds, deep gashes across his ribs where the witch's dark magic had found its mark. "You're hurt." Kerensa stumbled toward him, her legs threatening to give out with every step. The power she'd wielded had drained something fundamental from her core, leaving her hollow and shaking. "It's nothing." Lorcan caught her arm, steadying her even as blood dripped down his side. "The question is whether you're—" He stopped mid-sentence, his silver eyes widening. "Kerensa, your hands." She looked down and felt her stomach lurch. The starlight hadn't fully faded from her fingers. It was still there, pulsing weakly. But with each pulse, thin lines of black were spreading across her skin, crawling up from her fingertips like ink through water. "What?" She tried to shake it off, but the darkness only spread faster. "What's happening to me?" "The Covenant flame." Lorcan's voice was tight with barely controlled fear. "It wasn't meant to be wielded by someone whose powers were bound for so long. Your body isn't ready to contain it." The black lines reached her wrists now, and with them came pain. A deep, burning cold that felt like her veins were filling with ice. "Then what do we do?" Kerensa gasped, her knees buckling. Lorcan swept her into his arms without hesitation, turning toward the gathered wolves. His voice boomed across the hall with the full weight of his alpha command. "Gavrin, prepare the binding chamber, now." A massive wolf with steel-gray hair broke from the crowd, his face grim. "My king, the binding chamber hasn't been used in centuries. We don't even know if—" Then we learn quickly. Lorcan was already striding toward the doors, Kerensa cradled against his chest. "She has hours at most before the flame consumes her from within. I will not lose her the same night I found her." The halls of Valdris Keep blurred around Kerensa as Lorcan carried her through corridor after corridor, descending deeper into the ancient fortress than she'd ever known existed. The cold in her veins was spreading to her chest now, making each breath a labored effort. "Lorcan." His name came out as barely a whisper. "If I don't survive this, you will. But if I don't, you will." He looked down at her, and the raw desperation in his silver eyes stole what remained of her breath. "I've waited 10 years for you, Kerensa. 10 years of dreams I didn't understand, of a bond pulling at my soul every moment of every day. I am not losing you to a flame your mother meant to save you, not destroy you." They descended a final staircase into a circular chamber carved from black stone. Strange symbols covered every surface, not the writhing, wrong symbols of the Coven, but something older, something that hummed with quiet power. "The binding chamber," Gavrin said, appearing behind them with 3 other wolves, "built by the first Alpha to contain powers too dangerous for the mortal realm." Lorcan laid Kerensa gently in the center of the floor, where a perfect circle had been etched into the stone. "Will it work?" he demanded. Gavrin hesitated. "It might contain the flame long enough for her body to adapt." Or, or? The older wolf's face was grave. Or the process will tear her apart. Kerensa reached up with a blackened hand and touched Lorcan's face. Do it, she whispered. Whatever happens, do it. The last thing she saw before the ritual began was Lorcan's silver eyes, burning with a promise he might not be able to keep. The binding ritual was agony given form. Kerensa screamed as ancient power crashed through her body, wrestling with the covenant flame that had begun devouring her from within. She was vaguely aware of Lorcan kneeling at the edge of the circle, his hands pressed against an invisible barrier, his voice calling her name over and over like a prayer. But mostly she was aware of burning. And then she wasn't in the chamber anymore. She stood in a vast expanse of nothingness. Not darkness, not light, but something in between. The space between spaces, she realized. The realm her mother's people had once ruled. You came? Kerensa spun toward the voice. A woman stood before her, translucent, glowing faintly with that same starlight. Her features were Kerensa's features, aged by years she'd never gotten to live. Mother, Kerensa breathed. Malith smiled, and even as a shade, the expression carried warmth. My brave girl. My beautiful brave girl. I always knew you'd find your way here eventually. I don't understand what's happening. Kerensa's voice cracked. The flame. It's killing me. No. Malith stepped closer, her form flickering like a candle in the wind. The flame is testing you. As it tested me. As it tested every Veilborn who came before us. Testing me for what? To see if you're worthy of carrying its full power. Malith's eyes, those ever-shifting, extraordinary eyes, met Kerensa's with fierce intensity. The Covenant flame isn't just a weapon, my love, it's a responsibility. A sacred duty that our bloodline has borne since before the first wolves walked the earth. Kerensa shook her head. I can't. I don't know how to be what you need me to be. I spent my entire life believing I was broken, worthless, a mistake. How am I supposed to... You were never broken. Malith's ghostly hand cupped Kerensa's cheek, and though there was no physical sensation, warmth flooded through her anyway. You were protected, hidden, waiting for the moment when you'd be strong enough to carry the truth. And now? Now you have to choose. Malith's form began to fade at the edges. The flame is offering you its power, all of it. Enough to destroy the coven of the severed moon, enough to protect everyone you love, but accepting it means accepting what you are, fully, completely. No more hiding, no more pretending to be less than your true self. Kerensa thought of Lorcan, kneeling at the barrier, calling her name. She thought of her father, who had sacrificed everything to keep her safe. She thought of her mother, who had died with a word on her lips and a plan in her heart. She thought of Bryony's cruel whispers, he'd never choose you, and she realized something that shifted the entire foundation of her existence. She didn't need anyone to choose her. She needed to choose herself. I accept, Kerensa said, and her voice resonated through the space between spaces like a bell being struck. All of it. Whatever I am, whatever I'm meant to be, I accept. Malith smiled, and tears of starlight rolled down her translucent cheeks. That's my girl. She pressed her ghostly lips to Kerensa's forehead, and the universe exploded into light. When Kerensa's eyes opened again, she was lying in the binding chamber, the black lines on her skin receding rapidly. But that wasn't what made Gavrin stumble backward with a strangled oath. It wasn't what made the other wolves drop to their knees. It was Kerensa's eyes. They glowed with colors that had no names, colors that marked her unmistakably as what she truly was, a Veilborn in full power, the last of her kind, and the deadliest being to walk the realm in 1,000 years. 3 days passed in a blur of preparation. 3 days passed in a blur of preparation and revelation. News of what had happened at the choosing ceremony spread across the 12 packs like wildfire. The Alpha King had found his mate. Not among the high-born daughters of powerful families, but in a supposed half-breed whose true nature had shocked the entire realm. A Valeborn. The word was whispered in taverns and shouted in training yards. Some spoke it with hope, others with fear. And in the shadows of the northern realm, darker voices spoke it with murderous intent. Kerensa stood on the balcony of Lorcan's private chambers, watching the sun set over the Valdris Mountains. Her new eyes tracked colors in the fading light that she'd never been able to see before, the shimmer of heat rising from distant forges, the pulse of life energy in the forests below, the faint threads of magic that connected every living thing. "You're thinking loud enough for me to hear it across the bond." She didn't turn as Lorcan approached, but she couldn't suppress her smile as his arms wrapped around her from behind, pulling her back against his chest. "I'm thinking about what comes next," she admitted. "Seraphina escaped. The Coven of the Severed Moon won't stop just because I killed 2 of their members." "Seraphina?" Lorcan's voice darkened at the name of the lead witch. "She's been a plague on the realm for centuries. My grandfather spent half his reign trying to destroy her. And now she has even more reason to want me dead." Kerensa turned in his arms, tilting her face up to meet his silver gaze. "She'll come back. With more witches, more power, more desperation. Let her come." Lorcan's hand cupped her jaw, his thumb tracing the line of her cheekbone. "She'll find that the Northern Realm isn't as defenseless as she believes. It's not just about defense." Kerensa pulled away gently, pacing across the stone floor. "My mother didn't die just to protect me. She died to give me the weapon I'd need to end this war permanently. The Covenant flame isn't just for protecting myself. It's for destroying the Coven entirely." Lorcan's eyes narrowed. "You want to go on the offensive? I want to finish what my mother started." Kerensa turned to face him, and the luminous colors in her eyes intensified. "Seraphina mentioned they'd hunted my bloodline to extinction. Do you know how many Valeborn they've murdered over the centuries? How many children were killed before they could even understand what they were? Kerensa, I am the last." Her voice cracked on the words. "The last of a line that once numbered in the thousands. And as long as the Coven exists, I'll never be able to have a family, never be able to have children, without knowing they'll be hunted the same way I was." The implication of her words hung heavy in the air between them. Children, their children. Lorcan crossed to her in 3 strides, taking her hands in his. "Then, we don't just defend. We end this. Together. It won't be easy. Seraphina has had centuries to build her power base. She has allies in places we can't even imagine. And we have something she doesn't." Lorcan brought her hands to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "The 12 packs united under one banner, a Valeborn with the Covenant flame, and a mating bond that makes us stronger together than either of us could ever be apart." As if in response to his words, Kerensa felt that bond pulse between them, a golden thread connecting her soul to his, growing stronger with every passing hour. She hadn't completed the mating ritual yet. Neither of them had spoken of it, both knowing that such a permanent connection shouldn't be forged in the chaos of the past few days. But standing here, with his hands warm around hers and his silver eyes full of unwavering devotion, Kerensa knew with absolute certainty what her answer would be when he finally asked. A knock at the chamber door shattered the moment. "My king." Gavrin's voice was urgent. "We've received word from the southern border. The Coven is moving, and they're not alone." They called it an army, but that word didn't do justice to the horror massing at the southern border. Kerensa stood on a ridge overlooking Thornwood Vale, her Valeborn eyes taking in every detail of the nightmare below. Hundreds of robed figures moved through the morning mist. Not just witches, but creatures that shouldn't exist. Shadow beasts with too many limbs. Reanimated corpses of wolves long dead, their eyes glowing with sickly green light. Things that defied description, pulled from dimensions that the Coven had learned to breach. And at the center of it all, mounted on a beast made of living darkness, sat Seraphina. Shh, she's been planning this for longer than 3 days, Lorcan said grimly, his wolf rippling beneath his skin. Behind them, the combined forces of all 12 packs waited in tense formation, nearly 3,000 wolves, the largest gathering in living memory. It still might not be enough. She knew this confrontation was coming eventually, Kerensa replied. My mother's death was just the beginning. Seraphina's been building toward this for years. Can you use the flame at this distance? Kerensa flexed her fingers, feeling the power coiled inside her like a sleeping dragon. I can. But if I unleash everything at once, I might catch our own forces in the blast. The flame doesn't distinguish between friend and enemy. Then we give you a clear shot. Lorcan turned to face their army, his voice amplifying with alpha power until it rolled across the ridge like thunder. Wolves of the Northern Realm, today we face an enemy that has terrorized our kind for centuries. They've murdered our pups, corrupted our dead, sought to exterminate an entire bloodline simply because they feared its power. A rumble of anger rolled through the assembled wolves. But today, we are not prey. Lorcan's silver eyes blazed. Today we are the hunters. Today we show the coven of the severed moon why they should have feared us instead. The howl that answered him shook the very mountains, and then they charged. The battle descended into chaos within seconds. Kerensa fought to stay close to Lorcan as they carved a path through the enemy forces, her starlight cutting down shadow beasts, while his massive wolf form tore through reanimated corpses like paper. The bond between them sang with shared awareness. She knew where he was at every moment, could feel his wolf's fierce joy in battle, could sense when attacks were coming before they landed. They were devastating together. But Seraphina was prepared. Now, the witch screamed, and a wave of concentrated dark magic erupted from the coven's position, sweeping across the battlefield. Wolves dropped by the dozens, their life force being ripped from their bodies. Kerensa watched in horror as warriors who had fought bravely moments ago crumpled into empty husks. She's sacrificing her own army, Kerensa realized, harvesting their deaths to power something bigger. The air above Seraphina's head began to tear. Not tear. Rupture. Reality itself was splitting open, revealing a void of absolute darkness beyond, and from that void, something was emerging. Something massive. Something ancient. Something that made every instinct in Kerensa's body scream to run. A Void Walker, she breathed. She's summoning a Void Walker. The creature that pushed through the rupture defied sanity. It had no fixed form, just an ever-shifting mass of darkness and hunger that seemed to devour light itself. Its presence alone caused wolves to fall unconscious, their minds unable to process what they were seeing. Kerensa. Lorcan grabbed her arm, his face pale. Can you stop that thing? She didn't know. The covenant flame burned hot inside her, but this creature was from beyond the boundaries of reality. It might be immune to any power that existed within the natural world. But her mother's voice echoed in her memory. The Veilborn once ruled the spaces between worlds, including the void. Get everyone back, Kerensa said, her voice eerily calm. Everyone, as far as possible. What are you going to do? She turned to him, her luminous eyes meeting his silver ones. Something my mother never got the chance to finish. She kissed him. Hard, desperate, a promise and a farewell wrapped into one. Then she walked alone toward the monster that could end the world. The Void Walker sensed her approach. Its massive form shifted, turning what might have been attention toward the small figure walking across the corpse-strewn battlefield. Around her, the sounds of battle faded as wolves and witches alike paused to watch something that would be sung about for generations, or forgotten if it failed. Seraphina's laugh cut through the silence. Look at this, the last Veilborn walking to her death. The witch spread her arms, gesturing at her terrible creation. Your mother tried to stop us, girl. She failed. Your grandmother before her tried. She failed. What makes you think you'll be any different? Carenza didn't answer. She was listening to something else, a frequency beyond normal hearing, a vibration that existed in the space between heartbeats. The Void Walker was communicating, she realized, not with words, but with something older, something her Veilborn blood understood instinctively. Hunger. Endless hunger. Chains. Trapped. Release. Please. The creature wasn't a weapon. It was a prisoner. You didn't summon a monster, Carenza said softly, still walking forward. You enslaved one. Seraphina's smile flickered. What? The Voidwalkers aren't evil. They're beings from the space between realities, neutral, ancient, completely indifferent to the affairs of mortals. Carenza's glowing eyes fixed on the witch. But you found a way to bind one, to force it to serve you. How many centuries has this creature been your slave? Silence! Seraphina's voice cracked with sudden fury. It doesn't matter what you think you understand. The beast obeys me, and I command it to destroy you. The Voidwalker lurched forward. But Carenza didn't run. Instead, she closed her eyes and did something no one, not Lorcan, not Seraphina, not even her mother, could have predicted. She reached into the space between worlds. It was like pushing through a membrane of ice and fire simultaneously. Reality resisted, then parted around her will. She extended her consciousness into the void itself, touching the chains that bound the Voidwalker to Seraphina's command. Dark magic, blood magic, centuries of accumulated power holding the creature in servitude. And beneath those chains, a mind vast and ancient and desperately, achingly tired. I see you, Carenza whispered. I see what they did to you. And I am so sorry. The Covenant flame roared to life inside her, but instead of using it as a weapon, she channeled it into something else entirely. Healing. The chains shattered. Seraphina screamed as the connection between her and the Voidwalker snapped, psychic backlash throwing her from her mount. Across the battlefield, witches who had drawn power from the same enslaved creature collapsed as their magic guttered out like candles in a hurricane. The Voidwalker went utterly still. For one terrible moment, Carenza thought she'd miscalculated. That the freed creature would simply continue its rampage, now uncontrolled and infinitely more dangerous. Then it moved. Not toward her. Not toward the wolves. Not toward Seraphina. It turned toward the rupture in reality from which it had emerged, and the vastness of its presence seemed to shift into something almost like gratitude. A thought brushed against Carenza's mind. Alien, overwhelming, but unmistakably sincere. Little Walker. Kinnabetween. Thank you. The Voidwalker slipped through the rupture and was gone. The tear in reality sealed behind it with a thunderclap that knocked everyone, wolf and witch alike, off their feet. When Carenza opened her eyes, she was kneeling in a crater of crystallized earth, the Covenant flame dancing across her skin like living aurora. Her power had burned through her reserves, leaving her shaking and weak, but she was alive. And across the battlefield, the Coven's army was in complete disarray, their greatest weapon gone, their connection to dark magic severed at the source. No! Seraphina staggered to her feet, her face twisted with disbelief and rage. No, this cannot be. You're just a child. I'm the last Veilborn. Carenza rose on trembling legs, her radiant eyes blazing. And I'm done hiding. What happened next would be called the reckoning in every history written afterward. Carenza walked toward Seraphina on legs that shouldn't have been able to hold her. Her power was nearly depleted, her body pushed far beyond its limits, but the Covenant flame still burned, not as a raging inferno but as a steady, unwavering light, the light of justice. Stay back! Seraphina hurled bolt after bolt of dark magic, but each one dissolved harmlessly against Carenza's starlight. I am eternal. I have lived for 600 years. I will not be destroyed by some half-trained child. My mother wasn't half-trained. Kerensa's voice was quiet, implacable. Neither was her mother, or any of the Veilborn you murdered over the centuries. They were all stronger than you, Seraphina. Every single one. Then why are they dead and I'm still standing? Kerensa stopped 3 feet from the witch, close enough to see the fear finally breaking through her ancient arrogance. Because they showed mercy. Kerensa raised her hand, and the covenant flame gathered around her fingers, soft, gentle, but infinitely powerful. They had the power to destroy you, but they chose to spare you. Over and over. Hoping you might change, hoping the cycle of violence could end. Seraphina's face twisted. Mercy is weakness. No. Kerensa shook her head slowly. Mercy is strength, but some people mistake it for permission to continue causing harm. She placed her glowing hand directly over Seraphina's heart. I won't make that mistake. The covenant flame didn't burn the witch. It did something far worse. It showed her the truth. Every death, every child murdered, every innocent life destroyed in her pursuit of power. 600 years of cruelty and suffering condensed into a single moment of absolute clarity. Seraphina saw herself as her victims had seen her, not as a powerful witch, but as a monster, a horror, a blight on existence itself. The scream that tore from her throat wasn't anger, it was recognition. When the light faded, Seraphina collapsed to her knees, her eyes wide and empty. She was alive, but the woman she had been was gone, consumed by the weight of her own sins. Kerensa swayed, her reserves finally emptied. Strong arms caught her before she could fall. I've got you. Lorcan's voice, rough with emotion, was the most beautiful sound she'd ever heard. I've got you, my love. It's over. Around them, wolves were restraining the remaining coven members, who had all been affected to varying degrees by the flame's truth. The battle was won. The centuries-long war had finally ended, but Kerensa barely noticed. She was looking up at Lorcan, her mate, her king, her other half, and seeing their future reflected in his silver eyes. A future without hiding, without fear, without the weight of secrets and suppressed power. A future where their children would grow up knowing exactly who they were. Marry me, Lorcan said, his voice breaking. Not because you're a Veilborn, not because of politics or alliances or any of that. Marry me because I love you, because I've loved you since the first dream, and I'll love you until the stars burn out. Kerensa laughed, exhausted, overwhelmed, happier than she'd ever thought possible. Yes. The word echoed across the battlefield, and the wolves of all 12 packs raised their voices in a howl of celebration that shook the heavens. Later, they would call her the Veilborn Queen, the Flamebearer, the Walker Between Worlds. But in that moment, held in the arms of the man who had crossed a room full of nobles to choose her, Kerensa was simply herself. And that was more than enough.